Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I'm Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us, coming to you from Washington's nicest indoor shooting facility. Of course, that's Security Gun Club right here in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, speaking of Washington State, speaking of King County, did y'all see that King County Executive Dow Constantine, well, he's so concerned about the gun violence problem in King County, Washington, that he's decided, hey, they need their own Office of Gun Violence Prevention, very similar to what President Biden has done. Well, is that just liberal lip service trying to play to a base, or is that actually tell us a lot more? Well, I think actually it does tell us a lot more. And I've had a chance to do a little geeking out on it with somebody who I do a lot of geeking out with, and we're going to share our thoughts today. So today, let's spend a few minutes. Let's talk about King County's new gun violence office, the sham that exposes the sham. Okay, here's what we're talking about. Dateline, October 17, 2023. King County Executive Dow Constantine believes that King County's gun violence problem is so out of hand that a regional Office of Gun Violence Prevention needs to be implemented so that they can coordinate efforts with the federal government on how to reduce gun violence. Put in other terms, they are probably looking for new and creative ways to disarm you, the lawful and responsible gun-owning citizen in Washington State. Now, I didn't really think much of it. I kind of rolled my eyes and was like, well, you know, this is so often what we see. We're going to put together a task force. We're going to put together a committee. We're going to create a new office. And that is supposed to appease your base and make it appear as though you are doing something. But it wasn't until I started geeking out with independent journalist Michael Easton. And if you're not following him on Twitter, if you want to know somebody who's really got a lot of the dirt about what's going on in the state of Washington, check out Michael Easton right there on Twitter. He's been a good source of information for me, and he absolutely is constantly looking under every little rock, and you'd be surprised what he finds. Now, he and I started geeking out about this thing, having a conversation, and we realized, hey, wait a second. This whole thing is a sham that actually exposes another sham. Let me explain. Now, we are creating this whole new Office of Gun Violence Prevention because according to your King County executive, the following is the case. The pain of gun violence is all too familiar, and too many of our friends, family, and neighbors are facing this preventable tragedy every day. Whether it's a headline from around the country or right here where we live, work, and play, every act of gun violence is something we can stop from happening, but only if we work together. Now, listen, why I think that this is probably a lot of liberal lip service, let's talk about all of the shams that are being exposed here. First of all, undoubtedly, Dow Constantine agrees with this. We have an alarming increase in gun violence, not only in King County, not only in the Puget Sound region, but statewide. Anyone who follows Washington State homicides right there knows that the murder count each week is alarmingly high, and each of the last few years, we've set new records. Now, we also know, however, that in the last few years, your state legislature has significantly cracked down on your otherwise inalienable rights, all under the guise that they were going to save lives. They were going to limit high-capacity magazines. Why? Because that was going to save lives. They were going to ban assault weapons. Why? Because that was going to save lives. They were going to close the gun show loophole. They were going to implement Initiative 1639 with enhanced background checks. The list goes on and on and on of all of the measures that they said was going to save your lives. Yet why is it that every single year the murder rate and the violent crime rate in the state continues to rise? Why is it that a representative such as Liz Berry, who lives right here in this county, King County, clamors for a high letter grade from Giffords but could care less about the homicide statistics? Why is it that she doesn't even bother to write the legislation but allows groups such as Everytown and Moms Demand Action to write the legislation for her? Why is it that the Attorney General is going to go after every single one of these rogue gun dealers, which are just putting these weapons of war onto the streets, and yet despite the fact that they have done so, well, our homicide numbers and violent crime numbers continue to rise? Why is it that your state attorney general has now spent, as of July of this year, $1.2 million defending unconstitutional gun laws, which will inevitably, and we all know this, be thrown out as unconstitutional? Now that $1.2 million could be used to hire how many teachers, how many firefighters, how many troopers, how many other employees that were fired 2 years ago for having the audacity to make an independent health choice? You see, the sham that's being exposed is that none of these gun laws were ever passed to save lives. These gun laws were passed to disarm you, the lawful and responsible gun-owning Washington resident, and to deprive you of liberty and freedom. But here's the other thing that I think we should be worried about. As you probably recall from this video right here, we talked about some of the pet projects that your state legislature would clearly be working on. And one of those, of course, was a complete evisceration of our state preemption laws, which of course then would allow municipalities, counties, and so forth to set their own gun laws. Now just think, with that blank check of power, what the King County Regional Office of Gun Violence Prevention can do to disarm you, the lawful and responsible citizen inside King County, perhaps the county where you probably need armed protection greater than any other location in this state. So the bottom line is, Mr. Constantine, is if all of the gun legislation that you yourself have vocally supported, and all of the gun legislation that was passed, such as representatives inside of King County, Kathy Curterer, Liz Berry, Strom Peterson, if any of those pieces of legislation had actually saved lives, well, then there would be no reason for King County to create this commission, would there? Because you were never trying to save lives. If you were actually trying to save lives, you would have passed laws that actually affect the identifiable demographic group that's creating gun violence. And those are not the people that go to Cabela's and fill out their Form 4473. You know what group it is, and yet you choose to do nothing but turn a blind eye to their activities. The other sham is that clearly Executive Constantine is in the know. He's been a lifelong Democrat. He's part of the state Democratic machine. Does he know where the legislative efforts are going to be this coming session? He most certainly does. And it is obvious by the move for King County to create this commission that the state legislature is going to be hell-bent on absolutely eviscerating state preemption law from the books this legislative session. This committee, this office is not going to do anything to solve the problem, just like anything else that they've ever done, because they're not interested in solving the problem. They're only interested in disarming you. Listen, again, I do encourage all of you to follow Michael Easton. Check him out on Twitter right down there. In the meantime, if any of you have any questions about this or anything else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights, you guys should know how to get a hold of Washington gun law by now. If you don't, that's okay. That information, it's right down there in the description box. Now, in the meantime, let's remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation, how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching. And stay safe.